Now, smaller political parties are being courted after municipal elections left many councils undecided. What are some of the demands being made by potential kingmakers, and how realistic are these demands? Well, to discuss this, political analyst Professor Bheki Mngomezulu joins us now via Zoom from Cape Town. A very good evening to you, Professor Mngomezulu, and thank you so much for joining us. So, one of the kingmakers is Action SA, and the former mayor of Johannesburg, Ndate Herman Mashaba, has made it very clear he's not going to work with the ANC. So that party has been ruled out. He's unhappy with what he calls the arrogance of the DA, but he's still willing to work with them. Of course, I would imagine certain things need to be ironed out. But he's also made it very clear, as has the Patriotic Alliance, that they want to work with people who follow in their belief of not allowing illegal immigrants into South Africa. So if you want to work with these parties, Patriotic Alliance, Action SA, for example, you need to in some way agree to their terms, or if you have the influence, twist their arm to see things your way. Is that even possible? Does someone like Gayton McKenzie seem like he can follow in the footsteps of the DA? Can someone like Herman Mashaba seem like he can listen to the bigger parties?
Good evening, my brother, and good evening to your viewers. You know, I have a concern with our politicians. The majority of them are hypocrites because before the election, they were telling us that they are going all out so that they can get an outright majority. But now we're sitting with the reality where we have a number of hung municipalities, estimated to about 66 nationally, and then in some provinces and in some municipalities and metros, the number is in fact unprecedentedly high. So that is the reality now we're faced with. Now, the problem with our politicians is that some of them, not all, some of them don't seem to understand the difference between a national and provincial government election on one hand, and then also a local government election on the other. Some of the issues they are putting on the table are issues that fall under the purview of the national government and not necessarily they not necessarily fall within the purview of the local government sphere. Let's take, for example, the issue of a land expropriation without compensation. This is something that the national government is currently discussing, reviewing Section 25 of the Constitution. The issue of foreign nationals who need to be documented, I don't think that if I control 3 municipalities, then I will make sure that all foreign nationals that are in that municipality are documented. If they are not, I would kick them out, because I still have to abide by the national government. South Africa is not, in fact, South Africa is a unitary state and not a federal state. What that means is that the law that applies at the local government sphere is the same law that applies at the provincial government, and is the same law that applies at the national level. So I think those are the issues that I think our politicians have to be aware of as they go into these coalitions and as they make these demands. The demands must be rational and they must be within the confines of the law.
You obviously call it hypocrisy, Professor, but perhaps if you wanted to, be a little nicer to them. Let me perhaps use that word. If you want to be nicer to the likes of the Patriotic Alliance and Action SA, you might want to say maybe they're just overcome by the excitement of having done as well as they did in local government elections and haven't exactly thought through these demands that they have. And hence I asked you the question, do these two particular parties, because they did incredibly well, in the run of the government elections, for parties that are fairly new, if one would want to say that, I then ask, are they not seeming like they could still get their arms twisted by those who've been playing this game a little longer than them?
No, that is possible. You know what? Where this hypocrisy comes in, let's take the issue of Herman Mashaba, for example. He was the mayor of Johannesburg, and he got there under the ticket of the DA. And when he left the DA, it wasn't nice. Anyone who watched his exit speech would know that it wasn't something that, it wasn't a decision that was arrived at in a very peaceful manner, and the relationship was not cordial. And he's been vocal about it, saying that the DA, in fact, prevented him from doing what he would have wanted to do for the people of Johannesburg. And then all of a sudden, he tells us that he's prepared to talk to them, but he's not prepared to talk to the ANC. Then you ask yourself the question, is it about political egos in those politicians, or is it about service delivery? Because if you are going to be able to deliver services to the people by, in fact, forming a coalition with the EFF, for example, or with any of the smaller parties, so be it. And if forging relations with the ANC is going to assist you, go for it. Because it's not you deciding now. The electorate, the voters have decided, and they are forcing you as a leader to then do things that you would not ordinarily do. I think that is where then the issue of hypocrisy comes in. But I take your point that I would say that some politicians are overexcited right now. And then because constitutionally, they have to constitute councils within 14 days. So that is the reality they are faced with. Failing which, then the culture minister will come in, put the municipality under administration, and then call the by-election within 90 days. And there is no guarantee that if you won this time around, you are going to win again when there is a by-election. So they will have to then eat the humble pie and do things they would not ordinarily want to do.
Now, we're asking this question, Professor, what's at stake? You are mentioning that, essentially, if it works for you to work with the ANC, then you need to do it, because at the end of the day, that's the claim you made. You are running for elections because you want to deliver services. That's the problem the ruling party has struggled with for 27 years, is that they've not been delivering the services they've promised. So what then is at stake here? And perhaps on top of that, I want to ask what's at stake for the ANC, because the president did say in not so many words that if, as the citizens of the country, you want things to go right for you, if you want to get electricity, and not have load shedding, you need to vote for the ANC. To a lot of South Africans, that sounded like a threat, that if you do not vote for us, we're not going to give you your basic rights. So what's at stake for them as the ruling party that has, been losing over the last couple of years?
No, the ANC is facing a serious challenge, because it is on the firing line, by virtue of the fact that it has been the governing party nationally since 1994, and the fact that it has been running 8 of the 9 provinces. At one point, it ran 7 of the 9 provinces when KwaZulu-Natal was under the IFP. Means that the ANC is on the firing line. So if we talk about corruption, most of the people who are going to be on the receiving end are ANC officials, not necessarily because they are the most corrupt in the country, but because they are the governing party and therefore they are on the firing line. If, for example, we were to remove the ANC today, replace it with another political party, chances are you will still find corruption, albeit in a different context, but there will be corruption anyway, because we don't know how the other ones are going to perform, but now we know how the ANC has performed. So the stakes are high for the ANC. On the one hand, it has to redeem itself by being honest to itself, and then secondly, being honest to the electorate. By being honest here, I mean that the party has to concede that during the times when it was in power, there are things that went wrong, things that were done which were not supposed to be done, and things that were supposed to be done but were not done. For example, service delivery in a number of municipalities. So that is the reality they are faced with. As they meet over this weekend to iron out a couple of issues, the first thing for them to do is to be truthful to themselves, and then do a post-mortem of this election and ask themselves very tough questions. How did we get here? And how do we get out of this situation? Because if they don't do this, come 2024, the situation might be worse, given that we have a number of political parties, over 500 currently registered with the IEC, 325 of whom participated in this election. You have over 1,500 independent candidates that participated in this election. Come 2024, the number will be increased, and therefore we'll have a prospect of even more coalitions. So you don't want coalitions, then do things the right way, so that you don't get to the point where you have to negotiate with people you don't necessarily share the same view with.
It'll certainly be interesting what is going to happen in 2024 at the general elections. But thank you very much, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. Of course, he's the Professor of Political Science at the University of the Western Cape, also serving as a political commentator.